Good morning, fourth grade. We are going to continue reading in our text, Aset, devoted wife and mother. As we are reading, we are going to take notes using our CSPS strategy. Our quick write for today is based on the decisions that Aset made yesterday. What kind of person is she? Explain your reasoning. All right, so we talked about how Aset was, how she was, grieving, and she really loved Usher, and how she was considerate and loving and compassionate, but she also had this really selfish streak. All right, press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. It says, what motivates Aset to act the way she does? What do these actions reveal about her character and values? All right, our focus standard is making inferences about a character's qualities based on the decisions they make in the story. And we always want to make sure we're using text evidence. Our vocabulary words are pity, and that's when you feel sorry for someone or you have compassion towards them. This person is showing pity. Vacant, which means empty. This is a vacant auditorium. And mayhem, which is violence and chaos. This would be an example of mayhem. Go ahead and turn the page. And we're on page 9 of your text. All right, so we're... Here we go. On page 9, it starts with Aset put. All right, and we're collecting details about the character, setting, problem, and solution. Aset put the coffin in a boat and brought it back to Egypt. She would bury her husband as soon as they arrived home. Yet once they were on Egyptian soil, the desire seized her to open the coffin for one last embrace. Alas, piteous sight! Aset wept at the wasted body of Usher. She closed the coffin and hid it in the swamp while she prepared herself for the rituals of burial. All right, we'll stop right there because we have information about Aset's character and where she is. And so for the character, I would underline the first sentence that says, Aset put the coffin in a boat and brought it back to Egypt. Underline that sentence, write a C out beside it. I would also underline the last sentence, she closed the coffin and hid it in a swamp while she prepared herself for the rituals of burial. Underline that sentence and put a C out beside it. And for character, in box 1, I would write, Aset took Usher's coffin back to Egypt, and she hid it in a swamp while she prepared for the rituals of burial. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, we would write down this last sentence that says, she closed the coffin and hid it in a swamp while she prepared herself for the rituals of burial. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the setting. And for the setting, we would go back up to that first sentence that says, Aset put the coffin in a boat and brought it back to Egypt. And it also tells us in that last sentence in the first paragraph that she's in a swamp. So we would also have S out beside those two sentences. And then we would write in box 2, Aset is in Egypt near a swamp. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, we would write down this first sentence that says, Aset put the coffin in a boat and brought it back to Egypt. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're in the second paragraph, and we're looking for the problem. But during these months, Set had learned to transform himself into a fabulous beast, the terror of the desert, with the belly and the back of a wolf, a small snout that could pick up any odor, square ears that could detect any sound, and a bent tail that warned others off. Fearsome and vicious, he hunted in that form by night, and that very night Set, when he was out hunting, came across the coffin. He opened it and ripped Usser's body into 14 pieces. He threw the scrappy lumps of his brother as far as he could across the face of Egypt. This way Aset could never give him a proper burial. Usser could never be whole in the ever after. Set had made mayhem of Aset's and Usser's lives. All right, and so for our problem, we would underline the first sentence in the last paragraph about how he opened it and ripped Usser's body into 14 pieces and threw the scrappy lumps of his brother as far as he could. Underline those two sentences and write a P out beside it. And in box 3, we would write, Set found Usser's coffin, ripped his body into 14 pieces, and threw the pieces all over Egypt. This would keep Usser from being whole in the afterlife. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, we would write down these first two sentences in the last paragraph. He opened it and ripped Usser's body into 14 pieces. He threw the scrappy lumps of his brother as far as he could and across the face of Egypt. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. Go ahead and turn the page, and we're going to look for the solution. How is Aset going to respond when she finds Usser's body? In victory, he yowled so loud the earth shook. Yet still the story is not at its end, for good must prevail, or what we would all be strangers of hope. Aset wept. She sobbed. Set's sister-wife, Nebet-Hut, felt splintered. No one could watch the misery of Aset and not be touched. But it was Nebet-Hut's husband who had caused this misery. It was Set, that wild god Set. Didn't a wife owe loyalty to her husband, even if he was wild? Nebet-Hut chewed her knuckles. Her eyes grew glassy. Aset's tears fell in the Nile River till it overflowed and flooded the lands, and still she cried. Nebet-Hut shook her head. There were all kinds of loyalty. Aset was her sister, and Usser was her brother after all, and there was also a touchy and secret matter between Nebet-Hut's son and Pu, something that involved Usser and that made Nebet-Hut feel she owed Aset. And so she went to Aset and helped her gather the parts of Usser. They watched the circling birds of prey, a clue every time, and ran from one grisly sight to another until they had collected 13 pieces. But the 14th, where was it? All right, and you need to underline this sentence because it's part of the solution. They ran from one grisly sight to another until they collected 13 pieces. Put an S out beside that because that's part of the solution, but it's not all of it. They still have to find the 14th piece. Lost, hissed a passing serpent. Lost in the marsh monster. In grief, Aset rolled in the mud, and Ibis waded past, making his quiet grrr, the throaty noise of breeding. And Aset knew it was the god Tahuti, the tongue of the god Ra, come to give advice. Turn the page. So she let out a low, guttural wail mimicking Tahuti's, and the pieces of Usser assembled themselves, and Aset fashioned the missing part out of wax and clay, so Usser was whole, and she kissed him into consciousness. All right, so Aset was able to um, make a 14th piece. And then as she was growling, doing what Tahuti told her to do, all of the pieces came together and Usher was made whole. Make sure you have this sentence underlined at the top of the page. So she let out a low guttural wail, mimicking Tahuti's, and the pieces of Usher assembled themselves, and Aset fashioned the missing part out of wax and clay. All right. And in box 4, we have our solution. We would write, Nabet Hut helped Aset find 13 pieces, and Tahuti helped Aset form the last piece. Aset growled, and the pieces came together, making Usher come back to life. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. All right, and you can write down this part of the quote from the bottom of the last page where it says, until they collected the 13 pieces. And you also can write down this sentence that we underlined at the top of the page. So she let out a low guttural wail mimicking Tahuti's, and the pieces of Usher assembled themselves. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. The paragraph states, how does Aset respond to challenge? What does this reveal about her as a person? Okay, so her challenge was that Set ripped up Usher, and how does she respond to that? She works with Nabet Hut, she gets the advice from Tahuti, and he's made whole again.